So in our last video, we spoke about how social listening platform is able to help us with qualitative insights through the emerging themes and also the emerging topics that we might be interested to deep dive into. And in this video, I'll be showing you how a social analyst is able to deep dive into these emerging themes and come up with specific insights that will be able to feed back into the initial objectives that we were talking about in our first video. So what a qualitative deep dive is essentially a process that social analysts use to make sense of the vast amount of data that is out there. And the first step is really to determine the specific area that you want to explore. So as I was mentioning earlier with social media data, there is so much that is out there. And you'll need to rely on some hints or like metrics for you to specify the topics that you want to deep dive into. So for instance, what we saw earlier is that in our word cloud, there are more mentions around like physical wellness rather than the say nutrition or mental health. If I'm interested in starting a campaign around this health and wellness space, then the topic that I will be interested in might be more of physical health rather than the rest of the topics. So great, I have that settled. And the next step is to review and explore the data. And what this means is to go into the raw data that has mention of all the physical health and to really go down and look at it, get a sense of what is happening and the emerging themes just from looking at the conversation itself. So this is pretty similar to what I was sharing around data optimization. So eyeballing the data set, trying to get a sense of what the themes are before you do a random sample. So once you have a good idea that, okay, this data set that I'm looking at is specific to physical wellness and most of the conversations is relevant to what I'm interested in, then I'll be able to do a random sample and get a representative amount of conversations from there for me to really look into. So this is very much applicable only for large data set. If you have a small data set around topics that are super niche, then you will not need to do a random sampling. But if in our instance of physical wellness during a time of pandemic, lots of people are talking about that. And so I'll recommend doing a random sample of about 300 just to get a sense of what is going on the ground. So something I want to reiterate is that if we want to do random sampling and we have a huge amount of data set, it is really important that we have already done data optimization and not skip that step, because with a lot of noises in your data set, a random sample will not be accurate at all, and the insights that you'll be finding will be skewed in many different ways. So once you have that random sample, the next step will be to create initial codes. So when I'm saying codes here, it's not exactly what you're thinking of. We're not going to do any sort of coding. But what this means is categories of themes that you're seeing from the 300 posts that you have pulled out as a sample. So for instance, if I'm looking at the conversations around physical wellness, and I do see that with all this, a lot of it is tagged with some sort of activities one way or another. So there might be conversations around hiking, cycling, going to the gym, doing yoga, something we saw earlier, and also maybe swimming, right? And so when you're creating these codes, what you're able to do is to quantify how prominent each of these codes are, like how prominent each of these categories will be. Once the codes are quantified and you get a sense of how the breakdown is like, the next step will be to review this code and do some theme clustering. And what this means is to put the groups that make sense together so that you get a more general view and a different angle into your analysis. So, for instance, in our example earlier, if we're breaking down these conversations into the type of activities, and what I realized is that when I group the outdoor activities together, I might see significantly higher mentions as compared to the indoor activities. And I don't see that if I were to put all these different activities on individual scale. And this gives me an idea to say, okay, maybe my initial coding of the type of activity might not be the right way to do it. Maybe I should put it in terms of outdoors and indoor activity instead. And so grouping this group of outdoor activities together and going back into the data, I might find different findings where, perhaps when people are talking about these activities, it's more with a social aspect to it. So after being quarantined for the past couple of months, people might not be as keen to do their workouts indoors. So although there are a lot of conversations around physical wellness, the main motivation is not physical health. The main motivation is going out and having that conversation, having that interaction with their friends, which is something that they've been deprived of for the initial part of the year. And then that is an insight that people might not be looking for specific activities like yoga or running, and that people are looking for activities that they can do with their loved ones or their friends. That is something that is really interesting, right? Because Sonia is able to take this insight and go back to a team and say that, okay, we want to run a campaign, great. The campaign that we want to do might be around physical health, but it does not matter what is the specific activity that we're looking for, so long as people are able to still, interact and socialize with their loved ones during this pandemic. And that might be a great idea to get them to where they want to be with the initial objective in mind. Good. So after looking into these insights, like awesome, I know that the campaign I want to run will likely have to do with physical activity, although I don't really care what the activities are because people don't, and what they want is the social element in it. And then I'll be able to integrate these findings into quantitative insights and to come up with a more holistic data-driven strategy for the campaign that we want to run. So with the qualitative deep dive, it all goes back into our initial conversation around objective setting, and that the insights that you want to provide has to map back into that. So if our initial objective, Sonia's initial objective, is to be the top insurer in the health and wellness space for the post-COVID consumers, then what she wants to do is not just activities, right? Now that she knows that it's the socializing part that is something that people are really focusing on, that is what she wants to leverage on, and that is what she wants her messaging, her campaign, and her products to be around. So now that we've come 360 degrees from where we first started, which is objective setting, we can see how all this reconciles, right? So Sonia has an initial objective to reposition her brand as the top insurer around health and wellness space. And with social listening, she was able to explore the ground and to understand that what people want is things around physical wellness, but not because of the health itself, but because of the socializing aspect of it. And so she'll be able to execute some campaigns around it that centers around socializing in this post-pandemic world, because let's be real, things are not going to be the same. You can't do a 10K marathon run with like 20K people. And so it's time for the brands to really be innovative about how to address the consumers' needs in this new world of restrictions. And so once they have this new campaign rolled out, then they're able to start measuring again with social listening and to reiterate to see if it is bringing them back to their initial objective, which is to reposition themselves as the top insurer here. And so this is how social listening ties all this together. And that's it. That's the A to Z of a social analyst. And with any skills that are out there, I am sure that you need to take some practice in order to get a hang of it. So what I will advise everyone to do is really to log into the social listening platform. You will get an access as a student of this course, really to go in, try out your Boolean configuration, pull in some data, take a look at the analysis that you're able to derive from both the conversations tab through qualitative analysis and also the insights tab to see what are the insights that you're able to get from the topic that you are interested in. So that's it for introduction to social analytics. I hope you enjoyed all three parts as much as we did preparing it. And if you have any questions, make sure you sign up for the consultation that will be happening in the next week. So do check the course details to make sure you don't miss out on that opportunity, and do work on the assignment. And if you have any further questions, we'll always be happy to help. So email us at academy@circlesocial.com, and I'll see you then.